She smiled like it was an inside joke, one I wasn't meant to laugh at. My name is Frank Marston. I'm 48 years old and I analyze insurance claims for a living. I spend my days reading between the lines of what people don't say. That smile should have been my first clue. The legal envelope sat on our kitchen counter like a loaded gun. Diane picked it up with 2 fingers, the way you'd handle something dirty. The return address read, Rowe and Associates, Estate Law. Uncle Elliot was dead. I hadn't seen it coming. Nobody had. Elliot Thomas was 73, sure, but he still chopped his own firewood. Still beat me at chess every Sunday we visited his cabin up in the mountains. Heart attack, Diane said, scanning the letter. Happened in his sleep. The next part hit different. Elliot had left everything to me. Not Diane, not Kyle, her brother, me. What kind of man leaves a house, 40 acres of Pennsylvania woodland, and a retirement account to his niece's husband instead of blood family? The kind who remembers when that husband was filing for bankruptcy 7 years ago, when that husband's wife was packing suitcases and talking about needing space, when everyone else turned their backs. Elliot never judged me, never asked questions, just handed me an envelope with $15,000 cash and said, pay what you can back, when you can. I never forgot that. Diane read the will twice. Her face stayed smooth as glass, no tears, no shock, just that smile creeping back around the edges. We'll change that, she said, folding the papers. Don't worry. I didn't ask what she meant. In my line of work, you learn that people reveal more when they think you're not paying attention. I was paying attention. Diane walked to the living room and pulled out her phone. Her thumbs moved fast across the screen. I stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes that were already clean, listening to the soft tap-tap-tap of her typing. Who texts someone about a death instead of calling? The answer came 20 minutes later when Kyle's pickup truck pulled into our driveway. Kyle Morrison, Diane's younger brother. 45 years old and still borrowing money from relatives. He'd been a realtor for 15 years, but most of his deals fell through. Bad credit, worse judgment. He walked into our kitchen without knocking. That's Kyle for you. Heard about Uncle Elliot, he said, not looking at me. Shame. Diane handed him the will. Kyle read it once, then looked up at me like I'd stolen something from him. This doesn't make sense, he said. No, I agreed. It does. But it did make sense. Perfect sense. Kyle had been asking Elliot for loans for 3 years running. Small amounts, always with some story about a sure-thing investment or a client who was definitely going to close. Elliot never gave him a dime. That night, I slept in the den, not because Diane asked me to, because I wanted to think. I've been married to Diane for 18 years. I know her patterns. When she's planning something, she gets quiet, focused. She starts making lists in her head. At 2 a.m., I heard her phone buzz. Then again, then a third time. I got up and walked to my home office. 20 minutes later, I had 3 copies of Elliot's will. One went in my work bag. One went in the fireproof safe we keep in the basement. The third went in a safety deposit box I opened the next morning. You know what they say about insurance claims. It's not paranoia if they're really out to get you. The next morning, Emily came downstairs for breakfast. Our daughter is 16, all legs and attitude, but she's got a good heart. She hugged Diane at the coffee pot. I'm sorry about Uncle Elliot, Mom, she said. We watched from the kitchen table, watched Diane smooth Emily's hair, watched her lean down and whisper something in Emily's ear. It's going to be fine, honey, Diane said, just loud enough for me to hear. We'll fix this. Emily nodded and grabbed her backpack. Off to school, trusting that the adults would handle adult problems. What she didn't know was that one of those adults had already decided the problem was me. I finished my coffee and left for work. Normal day, normal routine. But something had shifted in the house overnight. Something that felt like the air before a storm. Here's the thing about analyzing claims. You learn to spot the patterns, the inconsistencies, the places where someone's story doesn't add up. Diane's story was about to fall apart. She just didn't know I was already 3 steps ahead. The will was safe. Elliot's trust was intact, and I had a feeling that Uncle Elliot, wherever he was, knew exactly what kind of people he was dealing with. Maybe that's why he left everything to me in the first place. The real question wasn't whether Diane and Kyle would try to change the will. The question was what they'd be willing to do to get their hands on Elliot's money. I was about to find out. The first motion wasn't legal. It was psychological. It arrived on a Tuesday, buried in a stack of mail like a snake in tall grass. Official letterhead. County courthouse stamp. A document request for cognitive assessment records related to Elliot Thomas, deceased. Someone wanted to prove Uncle Elliot wasn't mentally competent when he wrote his will. I sat in my car outside the insurance office, reading the fine print. This wasn't amateur hour. Someone had hired a real attorney, someone who knew that questioning a dead man's mental state was the fastest way to invalidate his last wishes. The signature at the bottom belonged to Morrison Legal Services, Kyle's law firm, or what passed for one. That evening, Diane made pasta, normal Tuesday dinner, normal conversation about Emily's grades and my workload. But halfway through her second glass of wine, she dropped it, casual as you please. You know, Uncle Elliot mentioned he might have written an earlier version of his will, she said, twirling spaghetti around her fork. Before he got confused. I kept chewing, kept my face neutral. Confused about what? Oh, you know, old age, the medications he was taking for his blood pressure. She shrugged. Sometimes elderly people change their minds about important decisions and forget they already made better choices. What kind of wife talks about her dead uncle like he was some senile stranger? The kind who's already planning his funeral before checking his pulse. Interesting, I said. Did he mention where this earlier will might be? Kyle thinks it could be in the house somewhere. You know how Elliot kept everything. Of course Kyle thinks that. Kyle probably thinks a lot of things when there's money involved. I finished dinner and went to check the mail. Hidden between credit card offers and grocery store flyers was another envelope, this one from Lancaster Title Company. Property lien notice. Filed against Elliot's estate by something called Mountain Vista Holdings, LLC. I'd never heard of Mountain Vista Holdings, but I knew how to find out who owned a shell company. Occupational hazard of investigating insurance fraud for 12 years. 20 minutes online gave me everything I needed. Mountain Vista Holdings was registered 3 weeks ago. Sole owner, Kyle Morrison. Filing address, Kyle's apartment complex. Kyle was putting liens on property that didn't belong to him yet. That's when I knew this wasn't just greed. This was war. The next morning, I called Gerald Rowe, Elliot's attorney for 30 years. A man who'd seen every dirty trick in the estate planning book. Frank, Gerald said when I reached him, I was expecting your call. Why's that? Because someone's been asking questions about your uncle's mental health. Someone's been digging for medical records. And someone just tried to backdate a notarized document using a notary who died 2 years ago. The pieces click together like gears in a machine. They're forging a will. That's my suspicion. Question is, what do you want to do about it? I thought about Elliot. About Sunday afternoons on his porch, teaching me chess moves I'd never master. About the way he'd listen to my problems without offering solutions I didn't ask for. What would Elliot do? Gerald was quiet for a long moment. Elliot left something, a sealed file. Instructions were clear. If anyone challenges the will or submits an alternate version, I'm supposed to open it. What's in it? Don't know. Haven't looked. But Elliot spent a lot of time preparing it last year. Said it was insurance. Elliot always was 3 moves ahead. That night, Kyle showed up at Elliot's cabin with equipment. I know because Mrs. Henderson, Elliot's nearest neighbor, called me at 11 p.m. There's people up at Elliot's place, she said. Lights, and some kind of flying machine. Drone. Kyle was surveying the property like he already owned it. I drove up there the next morning. Tire tracks in the mud, footprints around the house. Someone had tried the door handles and checked the windows. What were they looking for? Or what were they trying to plant? At home, Emily was different, quieter. She'd always been close to Diane, but now there was something secretive in the way they whispered in the kitchen. Something that stopped when I walked into the room. I checked her social media that evening. Call it invasion of privacy, call it parental intuition. I called it survival. Emily had posted 3 times in the last week, all defending Diane, all talking about family loyalty and doing what's right. Someone had been filling my daughter's head with stories. But I didn't confront Emily, didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. Instead, I did something else. I called my financial advisor, set up a meeting for the next day. By Friday afternoon, there was a new education trust in Uncle Elliot's name. Sole beneficiary, Emily Morrison Marston. Irrevocable, untouchable, protected. The trust would cover Emily's college, graduate school, whatever she needed. But here's the catch. No parent could access it. No spouse could claim it. No relative could contest it. Emily's future was safe, even if her present was being poisoned. Even if she never spoke to me again. That's what loving someone really means, isn't it? Protecting them from consequences they can't see coming. The final move came on Monday morning. I walked into the courthouse with a folder full of documents and a check for filing fees. Notice of interest, legal language for nobody touches anything until this gets sorted out. 1 signature, 1 stamp, 1 filing fee. Suddenly, Kyle couldn't sell Elliot's land, couldn't refinance it, couldn't transfer it to Mountain Vista Holdings or any other shell company he'd dreamed up. Every bank, every title company, every real estate attorney in Lancaster County would now see a red flag attached to Elliot's estate. The clerk who processed my paperwork was a woman named Betty, been working there for 25 years. Haven't seen one of these in a while, she said, looking at my notice of interest. Someone trying to pull a fast one? Something like that. Well, this'll stop 'em cold. Nothing moves now without court approval. I thanked Betty and walked back to my car. Kyle's truck was parked across the street. He'd been watching the courthouse, waiting to see what I'd do. Our eyes met through his windshield. I didn't wave, didn't nod, just looked at him long enough to let him know I'd seen him. Then I drove home. That evening, Diane was on the phone when I walked in. She hung up quickly, too quickly. Who was that? Kyle. He's having some trouble with a property deal. I'll bet he is. Anything I can help with? No, just family business. Family business. Like Uncle Elliot's estate wasn't family business. Like I wasn't family after 18 years of marriage. Maybe I never was. Emily came downstairs for dinner. She barely looked at me, barely spoke unless Diane asked her a direct question. Afterward, I sat in my office, looking at copies of all the documents I'd filed. The trust paperwork, the notice of interest, the backup copies of Elliot's real will. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I deleted the message, blocked the number. But I kept thinking about what Gerald had said, about Elliot's sealed file, about insurance. Elliot always was a careful man, methodical. He taught me to think 2 moves ahead in chess. What if this whole situation was just another chess game? What if Elliot had been planning for this exact scenario all along? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a business card. Gerald Rowe, attorney at law. Time to find out what Uncle Elliot really left behind. The forged will arrived with a dead man's seal and a live man's ambition. Gerald called me at work on a Thursday morning. His voice had that careful tone lawyers use when they're about to deliver bad news. They filed it, he said. Diane and Kyle submitted what they're calling Elliot's original will, dated 18 months ago. I set down my coffee. Around me, The insurance office hummed with normal Thursday business. Claim reviews, phone calls, people doing honest work. What does it say? Everything goes to Diane. House, land, accounts. You get nothing. The document was notarized by Robert Chen. Problem was, Robert Chen died of cancer 2 years ago. I knew because I'd processed his life insurance claim myself. They used a dead man's notary stamp? Looks that way. Either they're incredibly stupid or they think we are. Maybe both. Gerald had been busy since our last conversation. Turns out Elliot had prepared for this exact scenario like a man planning for war. I've got handwritten letters from Elliot, Gerald said. Written last year. Clear thinking, perfect penmanship. He talks about you specifically, about why he trusted you with his estate. But that wasn't all. There's also a cognitive assessment. Elliot took it voluntarily 8 months ago, scored better than most 40-year-olds. And Frank? There's something else. Gerald had pulled financial records, bank statements, transaction histories, the kind of paper trail that tells the real story. Diane withdrew money from Elliot's account 3 times last year. Small amounts, 500 here, 800 there. She had power of attorney for his medical expenses, but she wasn't using it for medical expenses. Hair salon, restaurants, Kyle's rent payment in September. They'd been stealing from Uncle Elliot while he was alive. That afternoon, I made a phone call to Janet Morrison. No relation to Kyle, different Morrison entirely. Janet writes a column for the Lancaster Examiner, local politics, community issues, the kind of reporter who knows where all the bodies are buried. I've got a story for you, I said. I didn't give her everything, just enough. Redacted bank statements showing suspicious withdrawals. A copy of the forged will with the dead notary's stamp highlighted. Public records of Kyle's shell company and the property liens. This is about the Thomas estate case, isn't it? Janet said. I heard rumors something fishy was going on. I can't comment on ongoing legal matters, but those documents speak for themselves. Janet's column ran 3 days later. She didn't mention names, didn't have to. Anyone who knew Kyle Morrison would recognize the details. Failed realtor, multiple bankruptcies, pattern of financial schemes. The headline read, When Greed Meets Grief, Estate Fraud in Lancaster County. Kyle tried his next move on Monday. Called Lancaster Title Company directly, told them he needed to transfer Elliot's land into a family trust. Just a formality, he said, paperwork issue. The title company pulled up their system, saw my notice of interest, red flags everywhere. Sir, we can't process any transfers on this property. There's a legal hold. Kyle argued, threatened, claimed there had been a mistake. The title company hung up on him. By Tuesday, Janet Morrison had written a follow-up column. This time she used Kyle's name. Public records, she explained, all perfectly legal to report. Local realtor Kyle Morrison faces questions about estate documentation practices. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Channel 8 News. They wanted an interview about estate fraud prevention. Thanks, but no, I said. I'm not the story here. But the story was growing legs. Other reporters started digging. Terms like probate manipulation and forged documents started appearing in print. Kyle's real estate license was under review. His shell company was being investigated. His apartment complex was asking questions about late rent payments. The pressure was working. Thursday evening, Gerald called again. This time, his voice was different, excited, maybe even a little afraid. Frank, you need to come to my office, tonight if possible. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's exactly right. Elliot planned for this, all of it. I drove to Gerald's office after dinner, told Diane I had to handle some estate paperwork. She didn't ask questions. Hadn't been asking many questions lately. Gerald was waiting with a manila envelope, thick, heavy, sealed with red wax. The moment they filed that forged will, it triggered Elliot's instructions. He wanted this opened only if someone tried to cheat you out of your inheritance. I stared at the envelope, Uncle Elliot's handwriting across the front. For Frank, when they show their true colors. He knew this would happen. Shrewd, he suspected. Said family brings out the worst in people when money's involved. Said you were the only one who never asked him for anything. That wasn't entirely true. I'd asked him for chess lessons, asked him to teach me how to split firewood properly, asked him to show Emily how to identify bird calls during our visits to his cabin. I'd never asked him for money. There's something else, Gerald said. Elliot recorded everything. Video, audio, conversations with Diane and Kyle over the past year. Legal in Pennsylvania as long as one party consents to recording. He was the one party. Smart man, thorough man. He documented every request for money, every subtle threat. Every time they suggested he should update his will. Gerald handed me the envelope. It felt like holding evidence. Like holding proof of something I'd suspected but never wanted to believe. He said, only one person could open this with dignity. Said that person would know what to do with what's inside. I turned the envelope over in my hands. The wax seal was perfect, unbroken, waiting. Did he say anything else? Just one thing. Said the truth would hurt, but lies hurt worse. Said you'd understand the difference. I understood. Uncle Elliot hadn't just left me his estate. He'd left me the tools to protect it. To protect Emily's future. To expose the people who saw his death as a business opportunity. Can I take this home? It's yours now. But Frank? Whatever's in there, it's going to change things. Elliot made sure of that. Rolled home with the envelope on my passenger seat. Didn't open it. Didn't peek inside. Some things deserve proper ceremony. At home, Deanne was watching television. Emily was upstairs doing homework. Normal Thursday night in suburban Pennsylvania. Except nothing was normal anymore. I went to my office and closed the door. Set the envelope on my desk next to a photo of Uncle Elliot and me at his cabin last summer. He was teaching me how to use his old chess set, the one with pieces carved from local wood. Your move, he'd said that day, pointing at the board. Now I understood what he meant. Outside my office, I could hear Diane talking on the phone. Quiet conversation. Urgent whispers. Probably Kyle, wondering why his real estate schemes were falling apart. I picked up the envelope, felt its weight, considered what Uncle Elliot had gone through to prepare this moment. How long had he known? How many conversations had he recorded? How many nights had he sat in his cabin, planning for a betrayal he hoped would never come? The envelope seal caught the light from my desk lamp. Red wax, old-fashioned. The kind of thing a methodical man would use when he wanted to make sure something stayed private until the right moment. This was the right moment. I broke the seal and opened Uncle Elliot's final gift. What I found inside changed everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and the price of trust. But most importantly, it showed me exactly what Diane and Kyle had been willing to do for money, and exactly what I was going to do about it. They expected inheritance. They got indictment. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Friday. Gerald's voice was steady, professional, but I could hear satisfaction underneath. Kyle was arrested an hour ago. Document fraud, financial misrepresentation. The DA's office moved fast once they saw what was in Elliot's envelope. I was making coffee when the phone rang. Diane was still asleep upstairs. Emily was getting ready for school. What about Diane? No criminal charges. Not enough evidence she knew about the forged notary. But the probate court issued a restraining order. She can't access any part of the estate, can't contest the will, it's over. Outside my kitchen window, Kyle's pickup truck sat in our driveway. He'd spent the night here, probably planning their next move. He wouldn't be planning anything for a while. By noon, the story was everywhere. Local news, social media. Janet Morrison's column had turned into front-page news. Local man arrested in estate fraud scheme. Kyle's mugshot looked exactly like what it was. A desperate man who'd run out of options. The details were devastating. Forged documents, dead notary stamps, shell companies designed to steal land from a dead man. The kind of story that makes people shake their heads and wonder what the world's coming to. Diane came downstairs around 10. She'd been on the phone for an hour. Her face was pale, but her voice stayed calm. Kyle made some mistakes, she said. Poor judgment, some mistakes. Like robbing a bank is poor judgment. The media's making this sound worse than it is. I poured myself another cup of coffee. How bad is it really? Kyle might have to pay some fines, maybe community service. His lawyer says the charges won't stick. Kyle's lawyer was wrong. That afternoon, Emily came home from school different. Quiet, angry. She'd spent the day watching her classmates read news stories about her uncle's arrest. Everyone's talking about it, she said, saying terrible things about Mom. It was remarkable. And what kind of things? She's a criminal, that our family steals from dead people. Emily's eyes were red. She'd been crying. It's not true, is it, Dad? How do you tell your 16-year-old daughter that her mother helped plan a crime? You don't. Your mom isn't going to jail, I said. That's what matters. Emily stared at me like I'd missed the point entirely. But you could make this go away, couldn't you? You could tell them Kyle was confused, that there was a misunderstanding. I could lie. You could help our family. Our family? Like I wasn't part of it. Like protecting Elliot's wishes somehow made me the enemy. That evening, Emily refused to come to dinner, stayed in her room with the door locked. Diane tried to talk to her, but Emily wouldn't open up. She blames you, Diane said when she came back downstairs. For what? For not stopping this. For letting Kyle get arrested. For choosing Uncle Elliot over your own family. I thought about that. About the choice I'd made. About what Uncle Elliot would say if he could see us now. Maybe she's right. But I didn't change anything. Instead, I called my financial advisor again. Added another clause to Emily's education trust. Expanded it to cover graduate school, professional training, whatever she might need for the next 20 years. Even if she never spoke to me again, her future was protected. Even if she hated me forever, she'd have choices. That night, alone in my office, I opened Uncle Elliot's envelope completely. Read through everything he'd left behind. The video files were the hardest part. Diane, sitting in Elliot's living room last spring, talking about how expensive Emily's college would be, how tight money was getting, how much easier things would be if Elliot simplified his estate planning. You don't want Frank to be burdened with all this property, do you? He's got enough stress. Uncle Elliot's voice, patient but firm. Frank's not burdened by anything. He's the most honest man I know. But family should take care of family, don't you think? Kyle appeared in the next video. Different day. Same gentle pressure. Uncle Elliot, you know that cabin's going to need work. Major repairs. Frank doesn't have time for that kind of project. Diane and I could handle the maintenance. Take it off your hands. Elliot's response was quieter. The cabin's not a burden, Kyle. It's a gift. But gifts should go to people who can appreciate them. People who understand their value. There were 12 videos total. 12 conversations where Diane and Kyle slowly, carefully tried to convince an old man to change his will. Never threatening, never angry, just persistent, relentless, like water wearing down stone. At the bottom of the envelope, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single-page letter. Uncle Elliot's handwriting, dated 3 months before he died. I read the first line. I didn't leave you the house, I left you her future. I stopped reading. Folded the letter, set it aside. Some truths are too heavy to carry all at once. I walked upstairs to Uncle Elliot's old fireproof chest, the one he'd given me last Christmas, saying every man needed a place to keep important things safe. I'd never understood what he meant until now. I placed the letter inside the chest, turned the key, heard the lock click into place. The videos went to Gerald. Evidence for the prosecutor. Justice for Uncle Elliot. But the letters stayed locked away. Not because I was afraid of what it said, because some gifts are meant to be opened slowly, when you're ready, when you've earned the right to understand them. The next morning, Emily came downstairs for breakfast. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "I hope you're happy," she said. "Kyle's life is ruined. Mom's humiliated. All because you couldn't share." She grabbed her backpack and left for school without saying goodbye. Diane poured herself coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. We hadn't talked much since Kyle's arrest. What was there to say? "She'll come around," Diane said finally. "Emily's just upset. She doesn't understand how complicated this is." "Do you understand?" Diane looked at me over her coffee cup. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married 18 years ago. Before Uncle Elliot. Before the inheritance. Before everything went wrong. "I understand that you made a choice," she said. "You chose a dead man over your living family." Maybe that's how she saw it. Maybe that's how Emily saw it too. But I knew the truth. I hadn't chosen Uncle Elliot over my family. I'd chosen Emily's future over everyone's greed, including my own. The trust fund was irrevocable. Emily would never want for anything. College, graduate school, a house, whatever dreams she decided to chase. She might never forgive me for it. But someday, when she was older, when she had children of her own, she'd understand that love isn't always comfortable. Sometimes love is making sure someone has choices, even when they hate you for it. Uncle Elliot knew that. That's why he'd left me the burden of protecting what mattered most. Not the house, not the land, not the money. Emily's future. The key to the fireproof chest sat heavy in my pocket, waiting for the day I'd be ready to read the rest of Uncle Elliot's letter. But not today. Today, I had work to do. The estate was silent, but the weight remained. 3 months later, I drove up to Uncle Elliot's cabin. The legal battles were finished. Kyle had pleaded guilty to document fraud and was serving 6 months in county jail. Diane had filed for divorce. Emily was living with her mother in a rental house across town. The cabin looked exactly like Elliot had left it. Mrs. Henderson had been checking on it, but nothing had been moved, nothing had been touched. I used Elliot's key to open the front door, stepped inside. The chess set was still on the kitchen table, same position we'd left it that last Sunday before he died. Elliot had been winning, as usual. My king was cornered. 2 moves from checkmate. I sat in Elliot's chair and studied the board, picked up my black king, held it in my palm. Uncle Elliot had always said chess was about thinking 3 moves ahead, about seeing consequences before they happened. Placed the black king in the center of the board, alone, surrounded by empty squares. Sometimes the king stands alone. That's the game. I locked the cabin and drove back to town. Emily's school let out at 3:15 p.m. I parked across the street and watched students pour out of the building. Watched Emily walk with her friends toward the bus line. She looked older, more serious. The last 3 months had changed her. Changed all of us. I didn't try to talk to her, didn't wave, didn't call her name. Instead, I walked into the school's main office, asked to speak with Principal Stevens. Margaret Stevens had been running the school for 12 years. She knew every student, every family, every story. "Mr. Marston," she said when I sat down in her office, "how can I help you?" I handed her an envelope. Thick, official looking, legal documents inside. "I want to establish a scholarship fund, full tuition, books, whatever a student needs for college." Margaret opened the envelope and read the first page. Her eyebrows went up. "This is substantial, very generous. What kind of students are you hoping to help?" "Students who choose what's right, even when it costs them everything." Margaret looked at me carefully. She'd heard about the court case, about Kyle's arrest, about my family falling apart. In a town this size, everyone knew everyone's business. "Any particular criteria?" Kids who stand up for principle when it would be easier to go along. Kids who tell the truth when lies would be more convenient. Kids who understand that doing right isn't always popular. Margaret nodded slowly. The Elliott Thomas Memorial Scholarship. That's right. Emily may qualify for this someday. She may. Maybe Emily would never understand why I'd done what I did. Maybe she'd spend years resenting me for choosing Uncle Elliot's wishes over family peace. But someday, when she was older, when she had to make her own hard choices, maybe she'd remember that her father believed in doing right, even when it hurt. Maybe that would matter. Or maybe it wouldn't. Either way, her future was secure. I drove home to my empty house. Diane had taken most of the furniture. Emily had taken her childhood. All that remained were the echoes of 18 years of marriage and 16 years of fatherhood. In my office, Uncle Elliot's fireproof chest sat in the corner where I'd placed it months ago. Heavy, solid, waiting. I opened the top drawer, pulled out the key. Inside the chest, Uncle Elliot's letter lay exactly where I'd left it. Folded once, waiting to be read completely. As words trailed off, the first line was still burned into my memory. I didn't leave you the house. I left you her future. What did the rest say? What other wisdom had Uncle Elliot wanted to share? What final thoughts had he left for the man he'd trusted with everything? I held the key in my palm, felt its weight. Then I put it back in the drawer, closed it softly. Not everything needs to be known, only remembered. Uncle Elliot had taught me to think 3 moves ahead, to see consequences before they happened, to understand that some victories look like losses until time reveals their true meaning. Emily was safe, her future was protected, her choices were her own. Kyle had learned that stealing has consequences. Diane had learned that betrayal has costs. Illusion. And I had learned that sometimes love means letting people hate you for protecting what matters most. Uncle Elliot's letter would wait. Maybe forever. Maybe until I was ready for whatever truth it contained. But the real truth was already clear. Some gifts are worth any price, even if that price is everything else you thought you wanted. The house was quiet. The wait remained. And that was enough.